Hi. So this video is about the differences between Cubase and Nuendo. I am using a slightly older version here of Nuendo. The rest of this tutorial series was recorded on Cubase 10 and then 10.5. At the time of recording this, Cubase 12 Pro and Nuendo 12 are the two latest versions, and I will be moving over to them. I do have them, but for this last one, I'll be sticking to Nuendo 11 in this case, to show you some of the basic differences here. And for the next videos, when we delve into some other great Nuendo features, I'll definitely be doing this on Nuendo 12, because the newest version has actually introduced new stuff that further differentiates it from Cubase. But for now, this version, I won't be playing you all that much. This is not going to be an in-depth demonstration of how any of these features work. And this is also not going to be an in-depth video of all of the differences. Please check out the link below in terms of Steinberg's website that shows you exactly what the differences are. There's lots of them. I definitely won't be covering all of them. In fact, I'll only be covering the few things that I really miss when I do work in Cubase. Now, as I've said before, Cubase is fully featured for audio post, even though it's made primarily for music production. It handles video, it handles AAFs, it handles surround sound up to 5.1. You could really do a lot of work in there. But I do miss a few of the very nice features, and there's a lot of more advanced features that become essential for certain types of workflows. So I've got a random calibration project open here in front of me where I'll show you stuff. But before we get there, just a few things that I won't be covering. Like Nuendo is the post-production focused digital audio workstation. And many versions ago, I don't know, around 5 or 6, I don't know up until when that lasted, you actually had to buy an additional Nuendo expansion kit that put the Cubase features back into Nuendo. But since then, they've sorted out the differentiation much more, and almost exclusive, almost entirely, everything that you have in Cubase, you will have in Nuendo as well. There's almost no exceptions to that nowadays. There is a bit of a timeline difference. They usually release the latest version of Cubase earlier, but the difference of, I don't know, a few months or half a year or a little bit more than that, not having some certain new features is usually not such a big deal. Some people always also think that Nuendo is better tested by the time it comes out. I can't really attest to that, but you do get an idea of what's coming to Nuendo with the latest Cubase release. And what I do also have to reiterate is project interoperability between the two is fantastic. Opening Cubase projects in Nuendo and vice versa really works really well and very stably, and all the times I've done that, I've had absolutely no issues. Obviously, there's features in Nuendo and plugins in Nuendo that won't be available, but the program handles that really seamlessly, and that's quite impressive to see. And you can also keep on moving it between the two. It's not like certain applications where once you've upgraded it to something with more features, you're stuck there. It really does play well between the two. So on the post-production side, what Nuendo really has extra that Cubase doesn't have is a lot of game audio stuff that I won't get into. There's also some limits where there's more things, like more inserts and more of the various things you get in the control room. Like you can have more monitors and more cues and things like that, even though the Cubase control room has all of them, just not as many. Also with things like surround sound, Cubase goes up to 5.1, where Nuendo has all the formats with Aura 3D and 22.2 and all the strange things in between that we did cover in class if you're a SD300 student. So it has a lot of that, and it has a lot of very specific import and export stuff in addition to what Cubase has. But let me stop talking now and actually show you some of the things that I miss the most when I'm in Cubase. And the number one thing is probably loudness related. Now, both of them have built-in loudness features. You have a loudness section in your control room. So if you go to the meter here and you go to loudness, you've got your built-in loudness meter that you can set up. By the way, the latest version of Nuendo has the Netflix measurement standards in here as well, which Cubase doesn't. But this standard compliant loudness meter is the same between the two. I don't actually use this one so much because I don't love the way it moves. So I use some other loudness meters for watching while I'm busy mixing stuff in terms of what they call meter ballistics, the way the different meters move and how you can make judgments based on that. But the thing that I do use extensively in any post-production project that I've done are loudness tracks. So this is a track type that you do not have in Cubase. There's a loudness track. It really only does one thing, and it measures loudness. So you can see it's got a few features on here in terms of what it's busy measuring and how it's displaying that. But just to show you how it works, I'm going to make a little selection here for a clip. And you don't have to real-time play through, nor do you have to export a mix down to get your loudness value. All you need to do, and let me just open that loudness meter again for you to see what happens here. I am going to clear it, if I can remember how. There we go. And I'm going to press this button, Quick Analysis. Now I've submitted a feature request to Steinberg to give us a key command assigned to that button. I don't know if they've done it in 12, but you have to manually press it. But you'll see when you press that, it does a very quick analysis of this clip. It shows me that the integrated loudness of that is just under -20 LUFS. And the nice thing is it gives you this little graph here where it shows you the kind of history of the integrated loudness for that. There's a thin reference line here. It's currently defaulting to our EBU standard -23. This is just a reference clip. This is not mixed or anything, so it is a little bit loud. But you'll see if I just do some arbitrary edits where I make this part soft, and I actually want to show you this bit. If I make it too loud, just want to double check that I don't have any I'm just going to switch off my loudness meter there that has a peak limiter, because I'm going to intentionally go over a true peak limit there because I want to show you what it looks like. So I'm just going to reselect this and I'm going to reanalyze. You can clear it with this button over there, but it's going to overwrite it when I hit Quick Analysis this time again. And you can see this section over here has dropped. My integrated has dropped slightly to -20.1, and over here we've got a red line, actually quite a big one, where it shows you there's been a true peak clip, a true peak over. This is arbitrary. I mean, I just pushed this clip and I didn't have a limit, and I'm not playing this on speakers right now. If you are curious about what I'm playing here, let's just reset this clip. You may recognize this.
Soundcheck is the definitive audio test disc.
And what you can also do is if you record enable your loudness track, then as you play through, it will show you that history graph. So it looks like this.
Soundcheck is the definitive audio test disc. It contains practical material compiled as a result of careful research and investigation into the needs of studio engineers, audio technicians.
I don't use that feature a lot unless I'm doing a watch through of an episode where I do the entire thing in one go and make kind of quality notes on that. Sometimes I enable the loudness record enable, because then by the end of the episode I'll know how far I am. But usually in my mix process I'll be doing multiple loudness checks as I go scene by scene and for the whole thing. So I kind of know where it is already before that watch through, but maybe I'm tweaking by a little bit to hit that spec spot on, and then I enable this. So, but I usually just do the quick analysis to get an idea of the whole thing. But as I just mentioned with scenes, I really like the idea of for a certain section or for a certain scene to do a quick analysis for that, just to get an idea and recalibrate my ears as I go through in terms of I'm expecting this to be a fairly loud scene. What are the numbers saying? And it's a different view to have that bigger view of a whole scene, but not a moving meter, and a very quick way to do this. Now remember, I may have mentioned this before, but one of the interesting quirks with the Nuendo and Cubase audio engine, I don't know if it's still the case with version 12, but it did used to be before. If you go to your audio engine here, you'll see my buffer size is set to the maximum because I am screen recording here and I'm mixing here. I'm not doing any live tracking, because your higher buffer size will actually mean a quicker mix down, and this loudness analysis is pretty much a mixdown behind the scenes where no actual audio gets saved. So you'll see if you work with very low buffer sizes and you have very low latency, your mixdown actually takes a bit longer, and this loudness analysis takes longer too. That's why I've got it set so high at this point. So that's it, loudness tracks. I do like to color code them too, not that, the actual loudness track, and love them. Love to get an overview. And just for you to see what it looks like with this arbitrary set of things I have here, as you would have surmised, the cycle markers that I put in, or the left to right locators, let me get my language correct, that is going to be the range that it does the analysis on. And for most meters, you have to reset them first. If you're using third-party plugins, I like to use the Waves WLM. Do remember to reset your meter first before doing the analysis, because it's an integrated measure. It keeps on adding to the average. So you have to start at 0 to get a good value here. And to give you an idea here, this is a 12-minute timeline with some audio on and very little processing, so it shouldn't take too long, but it's luckily way quicker than real time, clicking at 25 seconds to do an analysis. And as you can also see, as it should with proper class-compliant loudness meters, it is fine for mono and multi-channel and normal stereo value clips here that we've got on the timeline. Let's give it a few more seconds before we see our value at the end. You'll see with other third-party plugins like the WLM, the meter will actually bounce as it does the quick analysis, which is also cool to see. But this one just gives me a final integrated value. And you can see, because I disabled that peak limiter, that I've got some peaks here. This is a choir recording in 5.1 that has some large swells there, and I think it's clipping. Yes, because I am doing a 5.1 to 2.0 fold down, and all of these channels put together, even though it doesn't clip in my 5.1 here on the fold down preset, which is the standard one that adds together and gets us over the limit. But let me just re-enable my meter and limiter there again. The one thing I'm not going to show you specifically, but that I often end up missing a lot in Cubase, is there's a lot of extra plugins that are post-production specific that are great, but also the existing plugins that you have on both sides, they sometimes have more presets. So you would have seen in previous recordings here that I like to reach for our friend Reverence, the built-in Steinberg convolution reverb, and you may have seen me use the Japanese concert hall. This is arbitrarily put at 100% mix on this stereo track here, and so I'm not doing this for any artistic purpose, but you'll hear what it sounds like now.
Soundcheck is the definitive audio test disc.
But post-production specific things that are very useful are actual living spaces and some devices. Now, it's definitely not as refined as something like Altiverb and Indoor and what's their speakerphone plugin. But if you put this in a furnished room, let's go for C for no particular reason, you will hear
Soundcheck is the definitive audio test disc. It contains
some very useful domestic spaces for sound design, for dialogue editing, for mixing into real spaces. Some kitchens, bathrooms, furnished rooms, through a wall, through glass, things like that you will not find in Cubase, and they're very nice, easy to use convolution reverbs you've got there. Also, even things like this TV you've got here.
Soundcheck is the definitive audio test disc.
Again, only one. I sometimes use speakerphone, but I've got, on this computer, I've got Futzbox by MacDSB, and there you've got many TVs and phones and things to choose from. Here you don't, but for something that's built in and something that works quite nicely, I sometimes reach for things like this. Let me show you through glass as well, through a door, through glass.
Soundcheck is the definitive audio test disc. It contains practical material compiled.
Useful for post-production. And this plugin is very stable, and I don't find it to use too much processing. So that's reverence. And the same thing applies for some of the other plugins where you might have the plugin Cubase, but you've just got more presets and more options in here. So that is the second thing I wanted to show you. And the third thing I wanted to show you here, I'll maybe do a follow-up video. There's lots of little things, lots of things people think there's a difference between Cubase and Nuendo, but a lot of it's just preferences. So you'll see the default in Nuendo is that playback line that jumps back.
Material compiled as a result.
Because you end up doing things over and over a lot, where in Cubase the default will be it stops where it was. But in both you can set the default to something else. And I've actually started giving myself a key command where I can toggle between the two, because there are different use cases. My default is the jumping back to where it was for most of post-production, but sometimes you want to stop. For example, if I'm watching through an episode and I quickly want to stop and carry on where I was with my watch through, then I don't want it to jump back. And it's nice to have a key command for that. But the third and last for now thing I want to show you that is quite different, and here I can't quite understand the rationale for it being different because it looks so similar behind the scenes. But I'm opening audio connections, or F4. And this functions in the same way in terms of logic, in terms of key commands, in terms of the control room being in here. You'll see this, I've got my surround and stereo project with my stereo bus being the main mix at the moment because I'm doing a stereo screen recording. But you'll see here with the control room, when I add stuff, you'll see there's more available, as I mentioned to you already, compared to Cubase. But the one curious thing that I, as I said, can't understand the logic for is in Cubase, it will not allow you in the control room to have the same output, for example, assignment to two different things. And I get that usually when you don't want to double up and have double signal going to the same place. But in the case of things like monitor outputs, where you only have one of them playing at the same at any given time, that kind of prevents that anyway. So I don't know why you can't do this in Cubase. But for example, here I've got in my room here a Neumann surround set and some Yamaha bigger stereo speakers, and they're all patched in and plugged in. And yes, I can control them through my sound card, but if you're busy mixing or busy checking stuff, it's very nice to be able to quickly move between things. And not just the stereo version of my surround set and the surround part, but maybe even the different monitors. So you see what I've got set up at the moment here is my Neumann stereo going out through channel 1 and 2, and I've got my surround 5.1 that is not currently patched. Now in Cubase, when I go over here, you will see that 1 and 2 will be red like my Q mixes here. You can't go there because it's already used. But in Nuendo, it's not, and that's a very useful thing. Remember the shortcut here, I'm going to select all of these and I'm going to go Alt-Shift and just click on one, and it's going to cascade them 1 to 6. Now look, left and right is going to 1 and 2 over here, same as here, because it's the stereo pair and the same stereo part of my surround setup here, and you want to be able to go between those two. And this will become more apparent when we discuss surround fold downs and down mixes later on in this term. I'm saying this in this term, but I don't know when you'll be listening to this. So this duplicate is quite useful, and sometimes it won't be a duplicate. So this you can do in Cubase, but I'm just going to add another monitor, and this is going to be my Yamaha stereo monitor, also stereo, and you'll see there's that, and this does actually have a different output path. And now I'm trying to think where they patched to. I think they're on 7 and 8. I can go check. But just, you won't hear my monitors now. The Yamahas aren't even on yet. But remember, as we've covered in the control room video, monitor A, monitor B, monitor C in the order that you see them here in the control room. And when I close this and go to the control room, you can see A, B, and C here. So A was Neumann stereo, B surround. You can see if you mouse over, it tells you which one it is, or if you go to monitors over here, it shows you more clearly which one you have. So you don't have to just remember and guess between A, B, and C. But it's so easy to, while I'm busy playing back, listen to that one sentence and toggle between two very differently designed speakers to hear how it comes across differently. So that's one use case that you can do in Cubase, but the use case you can't is for something like surround mixing. Remember A and B, that's the same set of speakers, but this is just 2 of them and this is 5 of them. And when I have something like a 5.1 source over here, what you can do when you're busy with 5.1 mixing is, I'm busy with 5.1 mixing. I'm listening to my surround sound mix, my surround sound recording over here. And then I can instantly, while I'm in surround, at the moment you can see the surround is being folded down to stereo automatically. And I can cycle through the different ones there. Now, obviously, my project's not set up for surround right now, for surround output. So if I did have it in surround output, this being my main mix there, surround, and this actually going to a surround bus, which you won't hear. But now you can see my B, my surround set, it says 5.1 there, and I can listen to it in stereo, listen to it in mono. And that is quite useful. You can do that with your 5.1 monitor setup, but the ability to very quickly go between various setups like this using the same monitors, it's not quite as flexible in Cubase. Now this comes with a trade-off, and this is a funny thing that I've seen quite a lot. Very often in a default empty project in Nuendo, if you just create an empty project and your system, like the room you're in, is set up to use the control room, it is very likely or possible for you to have your control room output to your stereo speakers and have the outputs also assigned to them. And if I assign this over here, just make this my main bus again, main mix I mean, so you'll see that this is going to metric halo 1 and 2, and this is going to metric halo 1 and 2, and they'll both go there. And as I said, the default empty Nuendo project likes to have these guys on. So I've had it often where something feels loud or something's distorting, and it's actually because the system's sending it twice. And that's something that Cubase avoids. Nuendo doesn't, but that fact that Nuendo doesn't gives you some further routing flexibility. And the last thing I want to show you here, I mentioned it briefly already, but it really comes here with the import menu and the export menu where you have more options. I'm a big fan of AES31 files rather than AAFs, not in Cubase, and there's just other options that you can do here. And what's coming next in the next video, which we have covered in class if you're an ST300 student, but I want to show you the improvements to how Nuendo 12 does it and a few workflow tips that we may not have been able to cover in class, and that is the ADR panel. So you can just see here, this is what it used to look like in 11. When you open the ADR part over here and the ADR setup, very useful, very, very fully featured, but they've improved this even further in terms of functionality, new features, integration with Netflix certain files and with even third-party ADR systems, but they've generally had a big revamp of the marker section, and it looks better, and you've got a lot more options in terms of how it does stuff and where it displays things. So that is definitely going to make ADR much nicer, but I will show you that in a full separate video.